Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Or Zabludowski, CEO of Flexor, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Shanna Anderson, Senior Director of Customer Data and Insights at Fifth Third Bank. Before we dive in, I'd like to congratulate Shanna on being named to CDO Magazine's 2025 Global Data Power Women, an incredible recognition of her impact and leadership in the data community.
Absolutely. As Or mentioned, I'm Shanna Anderson. I lead our customer data teams as well as our data insights teams as part of our enterprise data office at Fifth Third Bank. And really what that means is that my team is responsible for mastering customer data at the bank and providing value for anything that involves customer data, as well as leading our ModelOps space and providing insights to the consumer line of business around projects that are related to revenue or profitability, as well as customer interactions and analytical insights that we can do to continue to better our customer experience.
One of America's biggest regional retail banks, this is a pretty big responsibility area to be responsible for customer insights. And in just a single sentence, you mentioned an entire landscape of data responsibilities, from building the teams and the initiatives and the agendas, supporting projects, MLOps, real-time decisioning, all the way to AI and how we enable these new technologies in the landscape. So let's begin with the vision and your top priorities. What are the top things that you're currently pursuing in data and insights at Fifth Third? And how are they changing how you deliver outcomes to the business?
There's lots of things that we're focused on this year, and we have a lot of big priorities. And one of the things in my background is I actually came from the business. So I did not grow up as a technologist or as a data engineer. I spent about 20 years in the consumer line of business, working on the front lines with our branches as well as on our consumer strategy side. And that's been able to uniquely position me to work with our business leaders on outcomes and what the things are that we can do with our data, how we manage our data, how we provide insights so we can make sure that we're hitting our outcomes that we want to do as a business strategically. And so for this year, really looking at 2025, there's a few things that my team has been highly focused on. One is we're a big part of enabling our modern data strategy here at Fifth Third Bank. And with a modern data strategy, besides the platforms that we use to create data pipelines, it's also different in terms of how our business can interact with being able to build data products, being able to understand more transparency around where the data is coming from, what source systems, which increases trust in the data that they're able to use in reporting or analytics that they're using for decision making. And so that's one of the big priorities, is how we help our business teams be able to interwork with whether it's data visualization or also being able to source data that they need as part of whether it's reporting or something that an executive may be working on. Another big piece is around involving our ModelOps space. And we've done a lot of work, and I'm sure we'll talk about this some more as we continue chatting. But over the past few years and through this year and the next, we will be working on how we completely evolve our ModelOps supply chain. All the way from how you begin a model to how you bring it into production, and working on ways to lean out, how we get a model built and to deploy it quicker. And there's a lot of places where we've been able to lean that process out. And then the other piece I would really call out in terms of priorities is around household growth and how we support that for the bank. And that's a big goal for us, of how we grow our households, how we increase our market share. And that's not just by branches that we build, it's also by different ways we can understand customer needs and make recommendations that fit those needs. And so there's a lot of work that my team that we spend on those strategies for growing households and what we can deploy into sales tools and systems that our bankers use out in the branches, all the way to insights that we can get around even spend patterns to help customers with understanding, where their money is going and where they're making purchases at. So it's simpler to understand for a customer, and also I think employs them to be able to manage their budgets better in their households.
Yeah, so I think that this is, on the one hand, very exciting, because this actually means bringing the insights to the edge, to the end customer, to the branches. On the other hand, it's all responsibility to handle that, because deploying an ML model that used to be this black box that was very hard to gain transparency and into understanding, explainability, is something that I know that you managed to figure out internally so you can release trusted models to deployment. And this is maybe the first point to double click into. You've been modernizing your infrastructure, both on the technology side and the operating model, to be able to deliver that. And I'm curious to ask where you are today, what actually changed and what drove you through this journey? Because there was a pretty big transformation in how we relate to machine learning in the last maybe 6 to 5 years.
Yeah. And, I think the first thing you mentioned was around there's a lot of responsibility when you're working with customer data, especially we work at a bank. So there's a lot of responsibility in like, how do you manage your customers' money? And there's a lot of trust that comes with that. And so, I tell my team all the time, like it's a fun, like Spider-Man thing, but like, great power comes great responsibility. So that brings even more, importance to the work that they do, and them being able to understand like the things that our developers and data engineers do on a daily basis. It really does make an impact. And so that quality of work and the transparency behind it, understanding voice of customer, those are all really important things that we hold dear. And that was part of even when we embarked on our journey around ModelOps and how we wanted to transform how we bring models to production. And, in this case, our data scientists that work here at the bank are a customer of ours because they're a big user of the ModelOps platform and that whole supply chain of how you build a model. So we spent a lot of time working with our data science teams as well as our governance teams of understanding each step in that full like model process as you're beginning to build it, and then understanding like, hey, where do we have gaps on our current platforms of where we bring models into production? Where do we have things where maybe we're duplicating efforts? Or even the cases of like where you're doing something at one step in the process, but maybe it belongs better at the beginning or the end. So that was a big piece in the beginning of like, how do we just understand that full process and map it out? We used a lot of Lean Six Sigma tools to be able to do that and understand where we had those opportunities to shorten timeframes, because if we can deliver models faster, then we also get to business value faster. So a couple of years ago, when we spent a lot of time doing that, there was a couple hotspots that we first recognized that have landed into things that we have delivered this year. The first one was how features are built for a model. And if you think about any type of model and the features that come into it, in previous state, our data science teams, if they built a feature, they would build that net new for every single model each time. And so if another data scientist came along and they were building the next model, but they needed that same feature, they would completely rebuild it. Or if it was going to governance and it was being tested, the governance team would completely rebuild it. So that's where it started some thinking of like, hey, what if we had a way where you're taking those features and we're able to put them almost into a marketplace, like similar to like a data marketplace that I know is pretty popular out there, but more into a feature store. So we are able to reuse features that data scientists are using for models and not have to rebuild them each time. And then same for governance, of every time they go to test a feature, they're able to understand more about that feature, not having to rebuild it as well. So that's one of the ways that we've been able to lean that out. And with doing that and having a feature store, we're also able to put basic statistical calculations around that feature. So then that way they don't have to be built outside of it. And also be able to share more about where's that feature data coming from, who owns it, what's the lineage of it. So you get a lot more robust things related to that feature as well. That simplifies that process. Besides Feature Store, which has been a nice win for our teams for model building, we've also done a lot around our platform this year and evolutionizing what we're using from going from an on-prem solution to a cloud solution for being able to build models. And we actually just launched that this month, which is very exciting for our data science teams, as well as for our MLOps engineers that are working on that. And that's going to completely change the types of models that we're able to do from data sources of using more big data that can enable even to real-time decisioning to the different ways that we can look at customer recommendations in the future. So all of that work has culminated into a much leaner ModelOps process, and also makes it easier for the teams to support and the data that we're using as part of our models too.
So I think that maybe the last piece is the hint for the future. Once you transition to the cloud, all of a sudden you can leverage the new tools of generative AI, large language models at the scale needed for such an organization, because it's easy to experiment on a really small scale, but you have a big customer base, you have a lot of demand for the business, and you need to adapt for that. And my company is working in the unstructured data space. So working with large language models is our day-to-day. And what we found out is that these models tend to behave like a black box. And the concept of a feature store that we were getting used to for more traditional ML is now getting a bit trickier. And it's how to govern and it's how to control. And we're getting asked all the time how we monitor our features, how do we make sure that there's no bias in the way that we return results, how do we ensure governance, we make sure that there's no data leakage. And these are these challenges transitioning for the more traditional ML to the Gen AI and generally speaking, the large language model space. So there's still a lot of excitement. I'm wondering if there's anything you can share about these pieces of your data ML stack.
Yeah, definitely. That's something, anything that is a black box or that is unexplainable, working in banking in a highly regulated, industry, like that's not highly acceptable. We have to be able to explain any type of model decisions, and, biases and things like that are something that have to be monitored with any type of model, because, there's a lot of regulatory, items that we have to make sure that we're mindful of and that we need to meet from a compliance standard. And then obviously, we don't want even unintentional biases to come out of any type of model decisions. And so there's a lot that we do from a governance standpoint regarding, whether it's a propensity model all the way to a machine learning model. And then if you start talking about even large language models and AI, that's something that we've spent a ton of time around governance and really setting the foundation of what does using those types of, large language models or also AI in terms of customer decisioning. That's something that, we obviously take very seriously. And we spend a lot of time of building the foundations, as well as like steer codes and folks that are looking at those models and making sure that anything that we're using is well understood. And anything that's not understood, really isn't something that quite belongs into making a decision based on a customer yet today.
Yeah, so this is, I think, an exciting part of our job nowadays is that we need to evolve our paradigms and the frameworks and foundations that we built so deeply into our workflows to a new kind of technology that almost prevents us from doing that in a controlled way. Thank you, Shanna, for the super insightful conversation. We covered so much ground here, so thank you so much for joining me today. And I'd like to thank CDO Magazine for hosting us here. And for more interviews and insights, please visit cdomagazine.tech, where they have all the best materials and the recording of this video too. Thank you.
Glad I could join. Thank you.